Hello and welcome to another episode of Sermon Braindump. My name is Scott Dalen, an ELCA pastor in Southwest Iowa. I prep these videos and present them on a weekly basis for two reasons. One, to just get my brain out of thinking mode and move it into writing mode as I'm preparing the sermon that I'll preach to my congregation on Sunday. And the second reason is to just allow you, the viewer who have stumbled across this video for whatever reason, whether you are a regular viewer or you just happen to find it, to give you some different insights into the scripture lessons as outlined for worship purposes. Now, this particular Sunday, which is July 19th, 2015, the 8th Sunday after Pentecost, our gospel lesson comes from the book of Mark, chapter 6, verses 30 through 34, and then 53 through 56. Chapter 6 of Mark has been active. We've had a lot of stuff going on. We've actually been in chapter 6 for a few weeks now. This finally coming to an end. If you recall, 2 weeks back, at the tail end of the gospel, we heard that Jesus took the disciples and sent them out two by two into the different area villages around Galilee to proclaim the gospel and to heal diseases, to cast out demons. From there, then we had an interruption last week, and in a flashback, we hear about the death of John the Baptist at the hands of King Herod. And now, starting in our gospel lesson for this week, we hear that the disciples are coming back off of their 2x2 mission. So that's kind of the background for where we start off. The apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. So they're back. They're gathering together and they're debriefing, if you will. He said to them, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest a while. For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat." So they've been doing their ministry stuff. We assume things have gone pretty well, and the disciples are excited about what's going on. We kind of hear a little bit about that in this account from some of the other gospels, but Jesus recognizes their need now to rest and to rejuvenate after doing ministry. And so he invites them to come away by themselves so that they can rest. Now, it's interesting within the Greek when he says, "You come away and you will rest." And he's going to come with them, but perhaps Jesus knows what's about to happen. He doesn't say we will rest. He says, "Come away so you can rest." Which just is interesting. And they're busy because Jesus' popularity has spread, not only because of what he's been doing, but also because of what the disciples have been doing around the region in his name. Popularity has soared amongst the people, and so they're coming out. They're constantly hounding them always. And that says they don't even have time to eat because people are just always coming after them. So Jesus is like, let's kind of pull back for a little bit, catch our breath. So they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. As he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. Okay, that's the first portion of what's going on. So Jesus and the disciples hop in a boat. They're cruising off down the seashore or across the sea. We're not really sure. People see them going. And figure out kind of where they're heading and get there in front of them. Now, this is an interesting situation to think about. On one hand, it's like, okay, does that just mean that Jesus is predictable? Did they say where they were going? Did they have a normal place in the wilderness or the deserted place, or in the Greek, eremos, that they like to go to? And the people know that? It doesn't really specify, but either way, people seem to get there ahead of them. And what's interesting to think about in this, and I'm probably not going to go here with the sermon, but this is a thought that I've been having, is just thinking about, is it dangerous to try and predict what Jesus is going to do, and to predict where Jesus is going to be? And as I think about it within our context of the church in the world as it is today in 2015, many people in the church are asking the question, what's next? The church is becoming something new, and what is that, and what is that going to look like? And we don't know. And what's God doing in the world right now, and what's our part in it? And we don't really know, and that's confusing. And so we're trying to perhaps predict or claim or judge, whatever you want to say, what is God up to? what's going on and take our part in that. And now for these people, they go to the right spot where Jesus is going to be, and that's fine. But for us today, interesting thing to think about. So that's just kind of a side note. Now at this point, then the gospel breaks, or it skips ahead. We skip from verse 34 all the way up to 53, and two important stories happen in that skip. One is the feeding of the 5,000 that we see. So the people come, and they're with Jesus all day, and we hear that he has compassion on them and begins to teach them. He loves them despite the fact that he might be tired, despite the fact that their break, him and the disciples, was however long it took them to cross in the boat. And so he has compassion on them and begins to teach them. That lasts all day, and the people are hungry, and he meets that need too in the feeding of the 5,000. Now we don't hear about it within this passage, but it's there. Following that, Jesus sends the disciples in the boat again to cross the sea again, and he stays to dismiss the crowds. And then he prays for a while by himself. Now, through the night, as the disciples are still trying to cross the sea, windstorm comes up, and we've heard similar stories before. They're struggling against the oars, and Jesus recognizes, I think they might need me. So he walks out to them on the water. The famous Jesus walking on the water. Now, what Mark does not include is the portion with Peter, where Peter says, "Lord, if that's you, tell me to come to you on the water." Jesus says, "Come," and Peter gets out of the boat, and he walks on the water for a little bit, and then all of a sudden he gets confused and starts to sink, and Jesus pulls him back out. That is not present in Mark. That's in some of the other Gospels, but we do hear that Jesus crosses and he's walking on the water. Then he gets into the boat and he calms the wind, again meeting the physical need of the disciples and then they continue on across the shore. So that's the gap in these verses that aren't present, and now it continues with verse 53. When they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret, which is a region, not a specific point, just to be aware. And they moored the boat. When they got out of the boat, people at once recognized him. Catching a theme there? And they rushed about the whole region and began to bring the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, into villages or cities or farms, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and begged him that they might touch even the fringe of his cloak, and all who touched it were healed. Okay, so we're kind of catching some circular themes going on here in the central portion of Jesus' ministry, and that's really where we're at this point in Mark's gospel. We're in chapter 6. The entire gospel's 16 chapters long, but once we get to chapter 11, or I believe it's through chapter 11, the remaining part is Jesus' last week. So like those last 4 or 5 chapters are all like a tiny little portion. So anything up to that is the ministry. And there's been healing, there's been exorcisms, there's been resurrections, there's been preaching and proclamation. That's all been going on. A few weeks ago, we heard the story of the woman who's been bleeding for 12 years, and she believes that all I have to do is touch Jesus' cloak and I'll be healed. We hear a glimmer of that there too, that all the people, all they have to do is touch his cloak and they'll be healed. The crowds constantly gathering. And why? Well, because Jesus provides for them. And it raises the question of their motivation. What do they want from Jesus? And likewise, what do we want from Jesus? Do we just kind of want to be around him, or do we come to him because we want something out of it? Or do we come to Jesus out of gratefulness for the fact that he died for us and his sacrifice makes relationship with God possible? Is that why we're around Jesus, or are we around Jesus because we expect something out of it? And that's the question that we ask of the motivation of the people. Why were they running all over the place? Is it just because they saw him heal people and they want something out of that? Are they hoping that that their notion of the Messiah, which is they think is going to be the anointed new king of Israel who will throw out the Romans, they think that's him? Is that what they're waiting for? Is that why they're gathering around him? We don't exactly know. It doesn't really tell us, but yet his popularity is there, and that raises suspicions of those in power, which we see directly after this in chapter 7. That all of a sudden then he's butting heads with the Pharisees and they're finding fault with him again, which we see a lot throughout the course of the Gospels. But again, he's developing a following. which raises the ire of those in power because he's feeding the people, he's taking care of the people, he's doing what they are supposed to be doing, and don't always do such a great job of it. So there's some tension that pops in there. The interesting thing, and kind of where I think I'm going with this sermon, is the notion that Jesus provides for the needs of the people, whether they really recognize what those needs are or not. Now, initially, he recognizes the needs for the disciples to rest after the work that they've been doing, and he calls them away to do that. Then when they get there and they find this whole crowd of people, he sees that they are like sheep without a shepherd. He has compassion on them, and he begins to teach them many things. So clearly, this group of people, they lack guidance of whatever situation we want to talk about. So Jesus provides that teaching. That's what this crowd needs. Then in the break, he provides food. He provides for their physical need for the 5,000 people. And then the disciples crossing the sea are having trouble. He provides for them by calming the wind and the waves. And then when he comes back together, he provides for these people. They are healed. He provides healing. He travels around, and that's one thing in the short 3 verses or 4 verses, we kind of catch a glimpse that this is a longer period of time because he's traveling around the region, and wherever he goes, they bring people to him and they are all healed. So he provides that healing. That's probably the direction that I'm going to go, is posing the question of what do we need from God? What do we need from Jesus? What do we need from our faith? And exploring that a little bit. And I don't exactly have great answers to that at the moment. We'll kind of see how that continues to develop. But that's what's happening here in this passage, or in this kind of little double passage with a gap in the middle. If you have thoughts, questions, or comments, by all means, please share those down in the comment section. I love to hear from you when those show up. It's fun to hear where some of you are that are catching these videos, and sometimes mind-blowingly awesome to find out that someone has listened to the video from the other side of the world. But yes, by all means, please share those comments and we can continue the conversation that way. Otherwise, have a great week, and we'll catch you next time. God bless.